The bill arrives on an ordinary day, not after an argument, not after a warning, not after anyone sat the patient down and explained what was coming. It simply appears. Maybe it is in the mail, perhaps it is in the patient portal, or it is a text message saying there is a new balance. But however it arrived, it carries the same message. Money is now being asked of you. The senior looks at the number and tries to place it. Was this the office visit, that lab test, the scan, the specialist I used, hospital? Was insurance supposed to cover this? Did Medicare already process it? Is this the final amount, or is it a mistake? Is it late? Is it urgent? Is it real? That is the quiet violence of medical billing. It takes an experience that began as care and turns it into a number the patient is expected to trust. But the number did not come from nowhere. Behind it is a chain the patient rarely sees. The visit became notes. The notes became codes. The codes became a claim. The claim went through a payer. And somewhere in that process, someone decided what was allowed, what was denied, what should be adjusted, what we should pay, and what is left behind for you. Then the leftover amount found its way to you, indeed. That is why the first question is not, how fast should I pay this? The first question is, why am I getting this bill at all? That question does not mean the bill is wrong. It means the bill has to earn your trust. A bill is not proof. It is only a claim. And before you pay, the claim needs to explain itself. You know, the visit felt ordinary because it was ordinary. A senior sat across from a doctor and tried to explain what was wrong. Maybe it was pain that was getting worse, or shortness of breath, or, dizziness, swollen joints, so forth. The conversation was human, the words were plain. The concern was real. In the room, it was care. But after the patient left, the visit entered another world. The doctor's notes moved into the electronic record. The visit is shaped into the language the payment system understands. The story becomes a code, and the reason for the visit becomes a code. The provider, the place, the date, and the service, all of it is reduced to fields in a claim. But that is not how patients think. No one walks out of an exam room thinking, I hope they translated my visit correctly. But that translation can decide what happens next. A test that made perfect sense in the room may look unsupported if the wrong diagnosis is attached. A routine visit may become more expensive if the system describes it at a higher level. A claim may be denied because something was missing, mismatched, or even submitted under the wrong information. The patient may never see the error. The first sign may just be the bill. And that is the strange thing about medical billing. The senior remembers what happened. The billing system remembers how it was coded. Two different things. They are not always the same. And when the bill arrives weeks later, the patient is not really looking at the visit anymore. The patient is looking at the system's version of the visit, a version that has passed through documentation, coding, claim submission, insurance review, adjustment, denial, or partial payment. And that is why the bill can feel so disconnected from reality. The patient thinks, I was there for one simple thing. the system answers with a balance. Somewhere between those 2 points, the visit was converted into payment language. If that conversion was accurate, the bill would make sense. If it was wrong, incomplete, or poorly supported, the patient may be staring at a charge that grew out of the translation, not the care. And that is why the question matters. Not as a technical challenge, not as an accusation, just as common sense. Before I pay this, show me how my visit became the bill. There is a quiet moment in the medical office when the patient believes the money side has been settled. You hand it over, the insurance card. That receptionist scanned it into her computer, and the computer accepted it. Maybe a copay has been paid. Perhaps someone at the desk has said, "You're all set." After that, the patient moves into the visit believing that the financial machinery is already in place. That belief is quite understandable. It is also, unfortunately, incomplete. An insurance card does not mean the entire visit is protected. It means the patient has entered a system of conditions. The patient may experience the visit as care, but the payer will later experience it as a claim. Those are two different worlds. Yeah? One is human, the other is contractual. The doctor may order a test because it seems medically reasonable. The plan may later decide that the record did not justify it. The patient may go to a familiar facility and assume the whole chain is covered. The insurer may decide that one piece of the chain sits outside the network. The office may move forward as if everything is routine, while the payer's rules are still waiting in the background. And that is why the bill can feel so unfair when it finally arrives. The senior did not feel like a financial risk was being accepted. They felt like instructions were being followed. Go here, do this test, see the specialist, get the scan, take care of the problem before it gets worse. And indeed, the patient acted responsibly, and then weeks later, the system returns with a balance that seems to say responsibility was not enough. This is the trap. Medical care often happens in the present tense, while coverage is judged later. By the time the payer reviews the claim, the patient has already been seen. The blood has already been drawn. The scan has already been done, and the procedure has already happened. Dental work may already be underway. The patient cannot go back and ask the question that should have been answered earlier. So when the billing office says your insurance didn't pay, the patient may feel cornered. But that sentence is not an explanation. It is a doorway. Insurance may not have paid because the balance is a normal part of the plan, or it may not have paid because the claim was not submitted correctly. It may not have paid because the payer wanted more support, or perhaps because the provider and the plan disagreed. May not have paid because the system is not finished. The patient cannot know that from the bill alone. And that is why the senior must resist the emotional pull of the leftover balance. The fact that insurance did not remove the number does not automatically prove the number belongs to the patient. It only proves that the system produced a result. And results in medical billing must have context. A fair bill should be able to tell its own story. It should show how the visit became a claim, how the claim was handled, and why the remaining balance amount is being placed on the patient instead of corrected, appealed, adjusted, or sent through another part of the process. Until the story is clear, the senior is not looking at certainty. He or she is looking at a number, and a number is nowhere near enough. Insurance does not just pay, it reviews, limits, questions, reduces, rejects, according to rules most patients never see. That may be how the system works, but it does not give the system the right to demand blind trust. So when the bill arrives, the senior should not begin with guilt. The senior should begin with clarity. Not, I must owe this, not insurance didn't pay, so this is my fault. The better response is calmer and stronger, as it usually is. Show me how this became mine. The next confusion, of which there are many, often arise before the bill itself. The senior opens the mail and sees a document from an insurance company, for Medicare or Medicare Advantage plan. It looks official, has dates, charges, payments, so forth. But there's a figure that seems to point back to the patient. For original Medicare, this document may be called a Medicare summary notice, and for other insurance types, it may be called an explanation of benefits. The name sounds harmless enough, but the document does not feel harmless when a large number appears on the page. People see that number and think they are being billed. The reaction is understandable. That document has a dollar amount. It has medical language. It may show what the provider charged and what the plan paid, and perhaps it might show an amount that appears to be your share. But an explanation of benefits is not a bill. A Medicare summary notice is not a bill. It is the payer's account of what happened to the claim. It is the system showing how it processed the provider's request for payment. It is not by itself a demand from the provider. It is not the final word on what should be paid that day. It is part of the evidence trail. That distinction truly matters because seniors are often pushed into confusion by documents that look more final than they really are. The payer's notice may say one thing, the provider's bill may say another, and the portal may show a third. The patient is left trying to make sense of a conversation that is happening between institutions and after the care has already been delivered. The patient should not have to guess. The provider's bill and the payer's explanation must be read together. One says what the provider wants, and the other shows how the claim was handled. When those two stories line up, the bill may begin to make sense. When they do not line up, then the gap itself becomes important. Because the gap may reveal that the insurance has not finished processing. It could reveal that a secondary payer has not acted. It may reveal that the provider billed too soon, failed to apply an adjustment, or is asking for an amount that does not match the payer's decision. It could reveal a denial that needs attention rather than blind payment. This is why these notices should not be thrown away as confusing paperwork. They may be hard to read, but they can protect you. They are often the only way to test whether the bill makes sense. The danger is not only that seniors mistake these documents for bills. The greater danger is that they fail to use them when the real bill arrives. A provider statement by itself can create pressure. A Medicare summary notice or explanation of benefits can slow that pressure down. It gives the senior something to compare against the demand for payment. It helps turn fear into a question. Does the bill match the claim history? That is the point. The senior does not need to master every line of the document, but the senior should understand its role. And it is not junk mail. It is not a bill. It is not something to panic over. It's a map of how the claim moved through the payment system. And when the provider asks for money, that map matters. Because before a senior pays the bill, and the payer's explanation need to tell the same story, need to line up. Please note that patient responsibility does not always mean pay immediately. The phrase appears quietly on the page, but it lands heavily. Patient responsibility. For many seniors, those two words feel like the end of the discussion. The system has spoken. The bill has been processed. The balance has been assigned. Whatever happened between the doctor, the provider, Medicare, the insurance company, and the billing office now seem to have arrived at one final conclusion. The patient owes the money. And that is why the phrase is so powerful. It does not merely sound administrative. It sounds personal. It suggests duty. It suggests obligation. It suggests that a decent person should stop questioning and pay. But medical billing is not that simple. A number can be labeled patient responsibility before the patient truly understands how it got there. The phrase may reflect a real obligation, but it may also reflect an unfinished process, a denial that has not been challenged, a claim that has not been corrected, a secondary payer that has not acted, or an adjustment that has not yet appeared. The words may look final even when the story behind them is still unsettled. That is the danger. The senior sees a phrase that sounds like a verdict. The billing system may only be showing a temporary result. And this is especially hard because responsible people are vulnerable to responsibility language. They do not want to be late. They do not want trouble. They do not want to seem as though they are avoiding a valid bill. So the phrase does exactly what it's capable of doing. It creates pressure before it creates understanding. And that pressure can lead to the wrong kind of payment. Not payment of a bill that has been explained and verified, but payment made to make anxiety stop. Payment made because the words on the page feel official, or because the senior is tired of trying to understand a system that seems designed to exhaust the patient. That is not control. Control begins when the senior treats patient responsibility as a claim that still has to be explained. The question is not whether legitimate bills should be paid, which of course they should. The question is whether this amount has earned trust. A fair bill should be able to tell a coherent story. It should connect the visit to the claim to the insurance decision, and the insurance decision to the balance now being placed on the patient. If that story is clear, the patient can make an informed decision. If the story is missing, rushed, or vague, the senior should not let a phrase do the work that proof is supposed to do. So when the words patient responsibility appear, The senior should not panic and should not surrender. The better response is a steady one. Show me why this is why. So, why do claims get denied? Well, denial has a way of making the patient feel as if the decision is already over. The notice arrives in formal language. The words are cold, precise, and distant. The patient reads it once, then reads it again, and still may not understand what actually happened. What comes through clearly is not the reason, it is the result. Net, the plan did not pay. That is when fear starts filling in the blanks. The senior may wonder whether the care should never have been given, whether the doctor made a mistake, whether Medicare rejected the service completely, or whether the entire bill is now going to land at home. The billing office may not help. Too often, the explanation is reduced to one sentence: insurance denied it. And that sentence sounds final. However, it is not always final. In reality, a denial is a decision made inside of a system, and systems make decisions for different reasons. Some denials are real coverage decisions. Some are basically paperwork failures, and some come from missing support in the record. Others may come from a claim that was sent badly, coded badly, or routed badly, and should lead to a correction, perhaps. Others might lead to an appeal, and some should lead to the provider fixing what the patient never controlled in the first place. But the senior does not see that machinery. All you see is the bill. And that is the injustice of it. The patient did not build the claim, did not write the codes, did not choose the billing pathway, and did not negotiate the rules between the provider and the payer. Yet, when the denial appears, the pressure often moves straight toward the patient, as if the patient created the problem. A denied claim should not be allowed to become a patient debt without explanation. That is the line. The denial may ultimately be valid. The patient may owe something, but the word denied cannot be treated as proof by itself. It has to be connected back to the care, the claim, the payer's decision, and the provider's responsibility for what was submitted. This is not a reason to ignore the notice. A denial can carry deadlines, and missed deadlines themselves can hurt. But it is also not a reason to panic beg. Fear can be just as expensive as delay. The senior's job is to hold the middle ground. Take the denial seriously, but do not surrender it blindly, because a denial is not a moral judgment. It is not proof that the patient did anything wrong. It is not proof that the balance is correct. It is a payment decision, pure and simple, and a payment decision can be questioned. Before that denial becomes money out of the senior's pocket, it has to explain itself. Okay, don't get nervous now. We're going to talk a little techie here, and we're going to talk about the portal balance problem. A patient portal is the private online account many medical offices now use as the main doorway between the patient and the practice. It is where the office posts information, sends messages, stores records, and increasingly asks for payment. For many seniors, the portal has become the new front desk, except now it sits on a phone, a tablet, or a computer screen. It was supposed to make things easier, and perhaps sometimes it does, but when a balance appears, inside the portal, the convenience becomes dangerous. A number on a screen feels official. It looks current. It appears inside the provider's own system. And there may be a button beside it that says pay now. And that button changes the whole emotional weight of the moment. The patient is no longer just looking at information. The patient is being invited to act. That is where seniors can get hurt. A portal balance can appear before the billing process is truly finished. The screen may not show what is still moving behind the scenes. It may not tell the patient whether the claim is settled, whether the amount has changed, or whether the provider's accounting has caught up with the payer's decision. It simply shows a number, and the number looks ready, but ready on a screen does not always mean ready to pay. Well, what it is that danger is speed. The portal makes payment easy at the exact moment when understanding may still be incomplete. A senior may click because the system looks official. A caregiver may click because they are trying to be helpful, and a family member might do that because they want the account cleared. And the money leaves quickly, and only later does someone realize the amount should have been questioned. That is the problem with the portal balance. It can make an unfinished process look finished. Our lesson is simple enough to remember. While looking at the screen, do not let the pay now button outrun the facts. A portal may be useful, a portal may be official, but the number inside it still has to earn trust. Before you pay, the balance has to make sense. That's the bottom line. This is another thing one needs to be aware of and is often unknown. One visit can create several bills. The senior may remember it as one visit. There was one appointment on the calendar, one ride to the facility, one check-in, one stretch of waiting at the office, and one period of care, and then you went home. In the patient's mind, the event has a beginning and an end. It is a single experience. The billing system does not always see it that way. Weeks later, the first bill arrives. It has the name of the hospital or facility, so at least we know that part of it makes sense. The senior may not like the amount, but the connection is clear enough. Guess what? Another bill arrives. This one carries a different name. Maybe it belongs to a physician group. Maybe it belongs to someone who interpreted a test. And perhaps belongs to a company that was part of the care, but invisible to the patient at the time. Well, the senior is no longer just confused. The senior feels ambushed. And sometimes this is simply how the so-called modern system divides care. The place where care happened may bill one part. The professional who provided or interpreted the care, for example, may bill another. The patient may have experienced one event, but the business system separated that event into different claims. That is what makes the process so unfair, apparently, right, to ordinary people. No one explains this clearly while the patient is being treated. A person recovering from a procedure is not studying billing relationships. You know that. A patient in an emergency room is certainly not asking which group employs which professional. The patient is focused on their body, on their pain, on their fear, what the diagnosis will be, and what the result of this whole thing is. The bills come later when the memory of the visit has faded. The delay gives bills a very strange power. A name the patient does not recognize can look suspicious. A second bill can look like a duplicate, and a third can make the patient feel as though the system is circling back again and again for the same event. The right response is not blind payment. It is also not immediate dismissal. The bill has to connect itself back to the visit. If the statement belongs to that day, it should be able to show why. If it came from a separate provider involved in the care, that relationship should be explainable. If insurance process it separately, that should be visible. If the amount is still unsettled, the patient should not be pressured as though the matter is final. You should not have to solve the mystery from memory. That is the point. One visit can create several bills, but each bill still has to prove where it came from. The patient may have experienced the care as one event. The system may have divided it into several claims. But division is not permission for confusion. Now comes the out-of-network surprise. This surprise feels especially unfair because it often happens after the patient thought the right decisions have already been made. The senior chose the facility, okay, and that appeared to accept the insurance. The appointment went forward. Your insurance card was taken. You were not pulled aside and warned that the financial ground was unstable. From the patient's point of view, the place was covered, the care was authorized to proceed, and the visit was inside the system. What could go wrong? Then the bill arrives from somewhere else, not from that facility that the patient recognized, not from the name on the sign outside the facility, not from the office that scheduled the appointment. It comes from a separate provider or a separate group or a separate company that was part of the care but never ever part of the patient's decision. Indeed, that is the shock, and it is a shock. The patient chose the building. The billing system divided the building into separate financial relationships. A senior can be inside an in-network facility and still be touched by people or services that are treated differently by the plan. The patient may never have chosen them, never spoken with them, and never understood that they had a separate billing identity. Big secret. But after the visit, all of a sudden, their names can appear on statements, and the words out of network can suddenly turn an ordinary episode of care into a serious financial threat. It feels like a trap because in practical terms, you had no real control. The person going in for a procedure will not and is not going to negotiate with every professional who may become involved. The patient is in pain, and they are not investigating corporate billing relationships. A senior in an emergency room is not stopping the process to ask who employs each person who enters the room. The patient is there for care, not for a hidden tour of the provider network. So when an out-of-network bill arrives after an in-network visit, the senior should not assume personal fault. The bill still needs to be addressed. It may be connected to real care. It may involve rules that have to be taken seriously, but it should not be accepted blindly simply because the phrase out of network appears on the page. That phrase does not end the conversation. It just begins a more serious one. The real issue is whether the patient is properly responsible for that balance. There may be protections that apply. There may be limits on what can be charged. There may be questions about whether the patient ever gave meaningful consent to receive out-of-network care. There may be a difference between what the provider wants to collect and what the patient can actually be required to pay. That is why this kind of bill has to explain itself with great care. And the senior should understand how the provider who is out of the network became involved, why the claim was treated indeed as out of the network, and whether the service was part of an otherwise covered visit, and whether the balance is truly the patient's responsibility. Without that explanation, the bill is only pressure dressed up as paperwork. In Part 1, we warned about out-of-network consent because signatures can matter. If the provider claims the patient agreed to out-of-network care, the document should exist, and it should be understandable. A vague memory of signing something at check-in is not sufficient. The patient needs to know what was signed, when it was signed, what it applied to, and whether it actually gave up protections. This is not about refusing to pay a legitimate bill. It is about refusing to be blamed for a network structure the patient never saw. The senior entered one facility for care. The system produced a separate out-of-network charge. Before that charge becomes money out of the patient's pocket, it has to make the connection clear. The rule is very simple. If the patient did not knowingly choose the out-of-network provider, the bill has a lot more explaining to do.
Part 10, Dental Bills, Same Trap, Different System. Dental bills deserve their own warning because dental coverage can make people feel safer than they really are. A senior hears the word benefit and naturally thinks it means protection. The office confirms that coverage exists. The treatment coordinator speaks confidently. The plan appears to offer help. The patient may be told that there is money available for dental care, and that the benefit should be used before it expires. That sounds reassuring. But a dental benefit is not free money. It is a limited resource that belongs to the patient. Once it is used, it may be gone. And if it is used too quickly, or used on treatment the patient does not fully understand, the senior may be left with less coverage, more debt, and fewer options when a truly urgent dental problem appears later. This is where dental billing can become its own version of the same trap. The patient may have gone in for some simple: a cleaning, a sore tooth, a loose crown, a denture problem, a question about pain. But the visit can quickly become something larger. The X-rays appear on the screen. The dentist explains concerns. The treatment plan is printed. The financial discussion begins. The patient is no longer just hearing about teeth. The patient is being asked to approve a plan, use a benefit, and accept whatever balance remains. That moment can be very hard to resist. Dental problems are personal. They affect eating, speech, appearance, comfort, confidence, and dignity. Seniors may already feel embarrassed about dental issues. If the office presents a treatment plan in a calm, professional way, many people assume the whole plan must be necessary and urgent. Sometimes it is, but sometimes the urgency is not medical. Sometimes it is financial. Sometimes the pressure comes from the fact that a benefit exists and the office knows how to use it. That is why the senior has to slow the moment down. The question is not whether dental care matters. It does. The question is whether the patient understands what is being recommended, what isn't, what can wait, what the plan is likely to pay, what the patient will owe, and what benefit will remain afterward. A dental benefit should serve the patient's health. It should not become a target. The same pattern appears again. Care becomes codes. Codes become a claim. The plan pays part, denies part, limits part, or applies its own rules. Then the balance returns to the patient. By then, the work may already be done, the benefit may already be spent, and the senior may be trying to remember what was actually explained in the chair. That is too late to discover that the benefit was smaller than it sounded. So dental bills need the same discipline as medical bills. The patient should not be rushed by the word coverage. Coverage does not mean full payment. A benefit does not mean the treatment is necessary today. A professional-looking treatment plan does not mean every item should be accepted at once. The senior owns the benefit. That is the key. It is not the office's money waiting to be captured. It is the patient's limited protection, and it should be used with care. Before a senior agrees to major dental work, the treatment plan should make sense in plain English. The financial estimate should be understandable. That should know what problem is being solved, what the likely cost will be, and what happens to the remaining benefit after the work is done, because once the benefit is gone, it is gone. And if the bill comes later, the same senior power rule applies. Do not pay just because the office says the benefit was used. Make the bill explain itself. Medical debt usually does not announce itself as a crisis on the first day. It begins quietly. A statement arrives. The amount may be confusing, but the paper itself looks ordinary. The senior may set it aside because insurance is still processing, or because the provider said something would be resubmitted, because the number does not match what Medicare or the plan seemed to say. Nothing about that first envelope may feel like danger. It may feel like another administrative mess that needs time to sort itself out. But the billing system does not always wait for understanding. Another notice arrives. Then another. Tone changes. What began as a balance becomes past due. What began as confusion becomes pressure. The name on the letter may change from the doctor or hospital to a billing company the patient has never heard of. Then the account may move again, farther away from the room where the care actually happened, into the world of collections. That is when the emotional weight changes. The senior is no longer just trying to understand a medical bill. Now there is fear attached to it. Fear of credit damage. Fear of phone calls. Fear of being treated as irresponsible. Fear that something legal may happen. The bill which never made sense has somehow become more serious simply because time passed. That fear is exactly where people make expensive decisions. A collection notice feels like proof, but it is not proof. It is pressure placed on a claim. The claim may be valid, or it may be flawed. It may be to a real service, or it may be missing the explanation that should have come long before the account was sent out. The collector may know the balance and the account number, but that does not mean the collector understands the care, the coding, the insurance decision, the denial, the adjustment, or the reason the patient is supposedly responsible. The farther the moves away from the original provider, the more important proof becomes. That is the part seniors need to hold on to. A bill should not become more trustworthy simply because the language becomes more aggressive. A balance does not become accurate because a new company is collecting it. A confusing charge does not become clear because the notice is in a harsher tone. At the same time, collection pressure must not be ignored. That is the trap on the other side. Silence can make matters worse. Deadlines can pass. Rights can narrow. A serious notice can become more serious. If legal papers arrive, are in a different category and must be handled immediately. So the answer is neither panic nor avoidance. The answer is controlled attention. Medical debt grows strongest when the patient is overwhelmed, embarrassed, and alone. It grows when papers are scattered, calls are undocumented, and the original bill is separated from the insurance explanation. It grows when seniors are pushed into paying because they are tired of being afraid. Senior power means pulling the claim back into the light. Where did this balance come from? How did the provider calculate it? What did insurance do? What was denied, adjusted, paid, or left behind? Why is the collector now asking the patient for money? Those questions do not disappear just because the account has escalated. A legitimate debt should be able to explain its own history. If it cannot, the senior should not be rushed into surrender. Medical debt is serious, but seriousness is not the same as proof. Collection pressure may demand action, but action does not have to mean blind payment. The bill still has to find its way back to the care. And before fear turns into money leaving the patient's hands, the debt has to show why it is real, why it is accurate, and why it belongs to the patient. When a medical bill does not make sense, the most dangerous reactions are usually emotional. One person freezes. Another pays too fast. Another assumes the system must be right. Another assumes the bill must be wrong. None of those reactions gives the senior control. The bill arrives with pressure built into it. There is a balance, a due date, a payment address, a portal button, or a warning that the account may move forward if nothing is done. The senior may be tired, worried, or embarrassed. The easiest thing is to make the discomfort stop, either by paying immediately or by pushing the paper aside. It can be costly. Ignoring the bill gives the system permission to keep moving without the patient. Notices continue. Deadlines may pass. A correctable problem may become harder to correct. A bill that could have been explained early may become a collection problem later. Silence may feel relief for a few days, but it does not protect the senior. Panic paying creates a different risk. It may quiet the anxiety, but it can also turn an unexplained charge into money already gone. If the claim was still being processed, if the provider had not applied the correct adjustment, if another payer had not acted, or if the bill was billed mistake, the senior may have paid before the truth caught up. The third mistake is assumption. Medical billing punishes assumption. A bill that looks official may still be wrong. A bill from an unfamiliar name may still be connected to real care. A portal balance may look final when it is not. Denial may sound like the end when it may still be open to review. A collection notice may feel like proof when it may only be pressure. That is why the senior has to resist being rushed into a false choice between panic and avoidance. The right posture is steadier than that. Take the bill seriously, but do not surrender to it blindly. Respect deadlines, but do not let deadlines become intimidation. Answer the problem, but answer it with documents, not fear. A senior does not need to fight every bill. A senior does need to understand a bill before paying it. Medical billing confusion thrives when people act too quickly, wait too long, or trust the wrong thing. The senior power position is simple: the bill deserves attention. The senior power method begins with a refusal to be rushed. That may sound small, but it is the turning point. Medical billing pressure depends on speed. A balance appears. A due date appears. A button says pay now. A notice sounds urgent. The system wants it before understanding. The senior's first act of control is to slow the moment down. Not to ignore it. Not to delay until it becomes worse. Simply to stop long enough to bring the bill back into the real world. The bill has to be matched to the care. It has to belong to a date, a visit, a provider, and a service the patient can recognize. If the name is unfamiliar, the bill has to explain the connection. If the amount is surprising, the bill has to show how it was built. If insurance was involved, the bill has to line up with what the payer said happened. This is how confusion begins to lose its power. Senior is no longer staring at a number in isolation. The bill becomes part of a story. The visit happened. The claim was submitted. The payer responded. The provider calculated a balance. If any part of that story is missing, the patient has found the place to press. Then the scene asks for documents. Not as a threat. Not as an argument. As a condition of understanding. The system is asking for money, so the system should be able to show the path from care to claim to balance. A legitimate bill should not depend on pressure. It should be able to explain itself. After that, the senior keeps the record together. Medical billing problems become harder when the facts scatter. One letter in a drawer. One portal message on a screen. One phone call remembered vaguely. One promise from a billing representative that never appears in writing. The senior power method those fragments into one place, so the patient is no longer fighting from memory. And if the answer still does not make sense, the senior escalates. That does not mean yelling. It means moving the question to someone who can actually resolve it. A supervisor. A patient advocate. Medicare. A trusted family member. A qualified advisor. Whoever is appropriate for the situation. The point is not to fight for the sake of fighting. The point is to stop accepting vague answers from people who cannot explain the bill. The senior power method is not complicated. It is calm control. Slow the bill down. Connect it to the care. Compare it with the insurance record. Ask for proof. Keep the paper trail. Escalate when the answer is not good enough. Get help before deadlines or legal pressure make the problem worse. That is not a list for a refrigerator magnet. It is a discipline. A senior does not need to become a billing expert. A senior does need to stop being treated like the last person allowed to understand the bill and the first person expected to pay it. The method is simple because the principle is simple. A bill is a claim. And before the senior pays, the claim has to earn trust.
So by now the question has changed. At the beginning of this episode, you were staring at a bill and wondering why it arrived at all. The bill indeed looked like a demand, looked quite final, and it looked as though the system had already decided the matter and that your only remaining role was to pay. But the bill is no longer just a number. Now we can see what may be behind it. A visit became documentation, documentation became a claim, the claim moved through insurance, coding, plan rules, adjustments, denials, provider billing systems, portals, and sometimes collection pressure. Somewhere inside that process, the number was created and assigned to the patient. Sometimes that number is correct, and other times it is not. Sometimes the only honest answer is that no one has explained it well enough to know. That is why podcast 2 asks the question, why am I getting this bill at all? It is a powerful question because it interrupts blind payment. It forces the bill to step out of the fog and requires the system to connect the charge back to real care, real documents, real insurance processing, and a real reason the patient is being asked for money. But asking why is only the beginning. The next step is proof. If the bill is valid, it should be able to stand up to review. If the balance belongs to the patient, the path should be clear. If the provider says the patient agreed to responsibility, the document should be shown. If the insurer denied the claim, the reason should be understandable. If a collector is demanding payment, the debt should be traceable. And that is where the next episode begins, entitled Make Them Prove It, where its podcast is not about anger, it's not about refusing legitimate bills, it is not about turning every medical charge into a fight, it is only about method. It is about what a senior does when the explanation is vague, documents do not match, balances appear too soon, denial makes no sense, the collector applies pressure, or the billing office keeps repeating the same answer without proving the charge. Because once a bill becomes pressure, a senior needs more than concern. A senior needs a way to respond. Podcast 1 was the warning at the front desk. Do not sign blind. Part 2 was the warning when the bill arrives. Do not pay blind. And part 3 is the response when the system still has not explained itself. Make them prove it. A bill is a claim, a balance is not proof, and when the system asks a senior for money, the answer should be calm, firm, and documented. Show me why I owe this. I want to thank you for watching and listening. I know it's been quite long. I hope that you got a lot out of it. I know I did. Please subscribe, like us, make a comment, and share this episode with others who might be interested. So until the next episode, take care.